Okay, so today we're going to be starting with, we're going to be talking about the science of social media. I work for a company called HubSpot. We sell inbound marketing software. What we're really going to be doing is, so I call myself a social media scientist, and the reason that I call myself a social media scientist is because I go to a lot of conferences, and a lot of social media conferences. I read a lot of social media blogs, and I hear a lot of advice I like to call unicorns and rainbows about online behavior. So the first unicorns and rainbows myth that I like to bust is I've heard this one a lot, and guys, let me know in the chat pane if you've heard this this myth a lot. If you've ever heard, don't call yourself a guru. I hear that it's, don't call yourself a social media guru. I've heard that. Yeah, I hear that all the time. Or rock star, whatever, an expert, or whatever whatever it happens to be. And so the problem is, if you look at the actual science of the matter, and you look at accounts who use the word guru or official or founder, speaker, or whatever in their bios on Twitter, they tend to have more followers than the average user does. Right? So, I think what the takeaway here is, if you identify yourself authoritatively, if you tell us why we should follow you, and it's because you're an expert, or if it's because you're an author, because you're a guru, then that's a good thing, and you will get more followers because of that. Another unicorns and rainbows myth that I like to try to bust is the idea that ideas spread solely because they're good. Right now, in my previous life at an agency, one of the things, one of the most frustrating kinds of conversations you can have is sitting around a conference room and somebody says, let's make something go viral. That's a really frustrating conversation to be a part of, not because I don't like viral things. The reason that it's frustrating is because when you ask people, well, what makes something go viral, usually what they tell you is it because it was good or because it was funny, and that's patently untrue, right? There are plenty of good ideas that go nowhere and plenty of bad ideas that spread everywhere. So clearly there's some other set of things that make ideas spread, make ideas go viral, quote unquote. And so what I've tried to do as a social media scientist is understand that other set of factors. I call them contagiousness. You can call them whatever you want, but it's those other set of factors that determine why things go viral. Now, a lot of the science and a lot of the jumping off point that I use for my data and for my work is based on something called the meme. Now, the word meme was coined, excuse me, by Richard Dawkins in his 79 book, This Selfish Gene. And what he does is he postulates that ideas can spread just the same way or they can evolve rather, just the same way that genes can. Okay, and so if a meme is or if a gene rather is a unit of sort of biological inheritance, a meme to him was a unit of cultural inheritance. And so much like the computer, the world of the Matrix was composed of computer code. Our world, our human world, our history, our culture is built of contagious ideas. They're built of memes. If the chairs you're sitting in right now, the Zipcast you're attending right now, wouldn't exist if it wasn't for somebody having the idea to build one, a chair or a Zipcast, and then that idea caught on and spread, and you eventually caught on to it either by buying one or logging in. Right? And so memetics then is the study of cultural transfer, and this is the science where I use as a jumping off point for a lot of my work. And so memetics studies why and how essentially memes spread and culture is built upon contagious ideas. So the key idea in memetics is this concept of evolution, and you're probably familiar with evolution from a biological standpoint. What you may not be familiar with is it from a idea standpoint. And so just to kind of cover the basics again, evolution occurs when there's variance in a population, meaning there's a population of, say, fruit flies. There's a whole bunch of fruit flies, but each one of them is a little bit different than the next fruit fly. And then there's competition for scarce resources. Fruit flies eat fruit, but there's only a certain amount of fruit available to the whole population of fruit flies. Therefore, the variation that is best suited to getting the fruit is going to be the one that wins. And so the takeaway here is that in your marketing you should try to conduct your own form of evolution. Try to see what campaigns worked. Try lots of different campaigns. Notice what worked about them, and iterate on what worked, and do more of that, and learn from that, and build on that, and then take those successful pieces and build on that. So this presentation is littered with these takeaways, and as an extra special bonus, these takeaways are all under 140 characters and therefore wonderfully retweetable. Now, reproduction rate is a concept I borrowed from epidemiology. it's called the R naught, or reproduction rate. Essentially, that's the single number, rather the average number of cases a single infection will cause. So if I have a cold and I give that cold to 2 people, and then each one of those people gives it to 2 more people, the reproduction rate of that disease is 2. Okay. And we can apply that to ideas, but a selection pressure, that is generally the scarce resource, the fruit in our fruit fly example, is a pressure that reduces, a factor that reduces the 2 of the disease, or the reproduction rate of a given idea, or a given species. And then the variation that is best suited to those pressures, the variation that can increase its R naught, is the variation that is best suited to winning, and is the idea that can overcome the scarce resources, or can overcome the selection pressures in its environment, is going to be the one that spreads the most virulently. Now, as an example of 2 different but equally successful, equally useful reproductive strategies, there's something called fecundity. Fecundity is the amount of children a species has in each generation. Okay, so fruit flies, for instance, they have a lot of babies in each generation. Every time they reproduce, they produce a lot of additional fruit flies. Longevity, on the other hand, represents how long each individual in that species lives. Fruit flies don't live for a very long time. On the flip side of that coin is elephants, for instance. Elephants live for 60 years or more, but they don't have a lot of babies every time they reproduce. So they're very they have low fecundity and long lifespans. Where fruit flies the opposite. Now, both of these species still exist, so it is both are useful and successful reproductive strategies, but you have to be aware of the difference. Now, applying this to ideas, we find that fruit flies are like retweets. I can spread them very easily. They're very fecund. I can make a bunch of retweets very, very quickly. But but the other thing about retweets is that they don't stay very long. They don't live very long. If I retweet something, there's a good chance that I'm going to, yeah, see, I just lost my focus there, Andrea. But so, once I retweet something, maybe I read the article that it's about, maybe I read the tweet, and within an hour, I'm probably done with it. So I'm probably it's not going to stay in my head for a very long time. On the other hand, religions tend to spread a little bit slower. Most major religions, I think, spread through vertical transmission, that is from parent to child. And so they spread much slower, so they're not very fecund, right? But they have a lot of longevity. Meaning that once I get a religion, I'm probably only going to have that religion, maybe 2, 3 major religions in my entire lifespan. So that religion is going to last years in my head. And so when the R naught of an idea or a disease is above 1, that means that every time somebody catches it, if I catch the cold or if I catch an idea, I'm going to give it to at least 1 person or more. That means it's going to be an epidemic. It's going to spread and spread and spread until everybody who could potentially be infected in that population is infected. If it's equal to 1, it's called endemic steady state, and it spreads, but it never blows up and completely overtakes the population. If, however, the R naught is under 1, what happens is it'll eventually die out. Meaning, 2 people are infected with an idea or a disease, and then in the next generation it's only 1, or it's fewer people than 2. It doesn't grow, right? And so there's this unicorns and rainbows myth from social media and viral marketing that all viral ideas spread exponentially. And if you were to draw what the myth looked like, it kind of looks like this. It means you start with a very small seed, and then they tell 2 people, and then they tell 2 people, and they tell 2 people, and it gets really big by the time you get down to the end. The problem is, most ideas that I've ever studied, and I've studied ideas in a variety of contexts, email, blogs, Facebook, Twitter, everything I've ever been able to actually study and look at the actual R naught, even some of the most contagious ideas that I found on social media, they all have R naughts under than, oh, Dan, I got to read. Can you guys hear me now? Can you hear me? Yep, I'm back. Okay. Sorry about that. I actually have the 2 view windows here. So I'm gonna start. Let's see where we are here in presentation. And then, yeah, my coworkers are kind of loud. I'm sorry. Okay, so here's where we were. I can't. They're like at their desk. So it's like they're okay. Anyways, so the myth, like I was saying, I don't know how far back, Ross. How far back did we lose my audio? Right here. Okay, so the myth of unicorns and rainbows myth about viral ideas is that they spread. You start with a very small seed, a few people essentially, and those people tell two people, and those people tell two people, and those people tell two people, and so the idea spreads exponentially and grows and grows and grows. The problem with that is that every time I've studied an idea, or a mind virus online, be that retweets, be that Facebook, be that email, be that blogs, the reality is they mostly have an R naught under 1. That means for every infected person that gets the idea, fewer people get it in the next generation. And I'll show you an example of that. This is called a tweet map. I used processing, which is a visualization library from MIT's Media Lab, and what I did is I visualized the spread of links through the Twitter sphere. So each circle here represents a Twitter user, and the size of the circle represents the number of followers they have, essentially, so the size of their reach. And what I found is that roughly, with some exceptions, or with very few exceptions, but with some variation in shape, most ideas spread not like this, the unicorns and rainbows myth, where it starts as a very small thing, very few people, and then it grows really, really big. But they start like this. And this is true for even some of the most contagious ideas ever. Sometimes you'll have bigger ones that take longer to die out, or sometimes they'll be shaped like a diamond, like they'll grow for a little bit, but then they do this eventually. And if you look at, here's a different kind of article. This is a tweet map, but again, you see it's got kind of more of a diamond pattern underneath that triangle there. Background noise is an issue. Sorry guys, I can't really do much about that. I just apologize. But again, yeah. And so any idea that I've looked at has a shape like this, not the unicorns and rainbows myth shape. And so if I'm going to spread your idea, 3 things have to happen. Now, I took the idea for this shape from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and what Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that essentially, for me as a human to be happy, a certain number of things have to be fulfilled. So what I've done is I've created a categorization, or a format by which marketers can increase their ability to go viral at every step. So if I'm going to spread an idea, 3 things have to happen. I have to be exposed to the idea. I have to be following you on Twitter. I have to be subscribed to your email list. I have to be, liking your page on Facebook. Okay, so then once I'm exposed to the idea, then I have to actually become aware of the idea. Right? I actually have to read your tweet, or open your email, or look at your Facebook page when your status is up at the top of it. All right? And then once I've read the idea, once I've become exposed to the idea, once I've actually become aware of it, then I have to be motivated by something in that idea to actually want to spread it. And I think that's a very interesting level, but we're going to go through each level one by one and optimize for each level. First, we're going to start with exposure, and we're going to talk about how to increase your reach, essentially, because that's how you increase your exposure. You increase the number of people who are following you on Twitter, the number of people who have liked your page on Facebook. And so to start the conversation, as I said before, the myth is that you seed your idea to a very small but influential group of people, and they spread your idea virally, right? The problem with that is, if you do a little bit of math, most ideas have an R naught well under 1, right? And it actually tends to be much, much lower than 0.1, but let's just use 0.1 for argument's sake. If you seed a 0.1 R naught idea to 10 people, it dies out within 3 generations. If you seed it to 100,000 people, you get up to 6 generations, and a lot more people see it. So clearly, the important thing to do is to seed to as many people as possible, have as large of a reach as possible, have as many people following you on Twitter as possible, and then your ideas will have a much better chance of spreading. Now, Duncan Watts and Jonah Peretti were the 2 academics who did some research on this, and who did some study on contagious ideas and found that big seeds were the way to go. They did a bunch of different tests and found that when you expose an idea, a viral idea, to a lot of people at first, it spreads a lot better than if you just expose it to very few people. And so the funnel that I'm working with before is like Zarella's hierarchy of contagiousness, is what I call it. It's based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so some ideas as how to build your reach, what I did is I looked at, here at HubSpot, we have a tool called Twitter Grader, twittergrader.com, and it's a free tool. It just helps you grade your Twitter account and see how well you're doing on Twitter. But what it allows me to do as a researcher, or as a social media scientist, is look at a bunch of data about different people on Twitter and how those behaviors are actually helping or hurting them. And so one thing that I found is that a lot of people on Twitter in our data set actually don't have that many or don't have a bio filled out, don't have a profile picture, don't have a website URL filled out. A lot more than I expected. Oh, it's changed over time, but at some points it was well over half. It was close to 60 or 70% of people didn't have these things in their account, specified in their account. But what happens if you look at accounts that have stuff like a picture or a bio or a website URL, they tend to have a lot more followers than accounts that don't have those things filled out. So again, identify yourself authoritatively, show us what you look like, show us who you are, show us your website, and tell us why we should listen to you, why we should follow you, why it's important to follow you. Now, another thing that's really important when you're thinking about how to build your reach is self-reference. And so what I did is I used a tool I built called TweetSight. But TweetSight, I just applied it to Twitter. It actually is based on two linguistic analysis algorithms developed at universities by academics much smarter than I am. And what they found is that as the amount of self-reference an account makes goes up, as you talk about yourself more, the number of followers you have goes down. Right? And so there's the unicorn and rainbows myth of just be yourself. Well, yeah, maybe be yourself. Don't pretend you're somebody else, but don't talk about yourself so much because people don't want to follow you. And then again, looking at Twitter, looking at negative remarks on Twitter, as negative remarks increase, followers kind of decrease. So positivity does work. And when we look at Facebook data in a little bit, we will learn that positivity works very well there. The takeaway here is that audience size does matter. I get into a lot of conversations, with folks who say that quality of followers is more important than quantity. And it is not. That is not true. Okay, the things are both important, but if I have, and usually the way they say it is, well, if I have 10 followers who really engage in what I'm saying, that's better than having 100,000 followers who are not engaged in what I'm saying. But that's a purely artificial hypothetical situation. If you really had 100,000 followers who had chosen to follow you on Twitter, way more than 10 of them would be interested in what you're saying, right? So audience size does matter. The math shows that it does. So we can work hard and we can get more Twitter followers, or we can work smarter and we can try to get more influential seeds, influential Facebook fans, influential friends. And so what I did, this is a study I did a long time ago, back when Twitter was really bleeding edge, meaning that the only people who used Twitter back then were social media dorks, essentially. And so what I found was that I called, and this is actually back before I had a name for a user of Twitter, which we'd call it tweeter now. But what I found is that when you asked people who how often they shared content with their friends, people who use Twitter tended to share content with their friends more often. And this is one-to-one sharing I was talking about, not like tweeting. So I asked people, how often you IM links to people, how often you email links to individual people. And people who use Twitter, bleeding edge social media dorks, and again I say that lovingly because I am a social media dork, tend to share more frequently. Okay, and then when you ask them how many people they reach when they share stuff, again, those bleeding edge social media dorks tend to share with more people, so they share more frequently and with a much larger number of people, meaning that there is a segment of the population, and they generally tend to be very bleeding edge social media adopters who are more influential. So sometimes I get people asking me, or people saying to me, I sell X, Y sort of widgets, and it's not a very sexy product, and so my audience is probably not on social media. You may be right. I'll give you that. They may not be on Twitter. They're on Facebook. Everybody's on Facebook, but they may not be on Twitter. They may not be reading blogs a whole lot. But the segment of your population, and there is a segment, it may just be small, but the segment of your population that is in social media, that is on these channels, is by definition then the most influential part of your market. That is the part of the market that is sharing content more frequently, that is sharing content with more people. So if you need to reach only one part of your market, that is one of the most important segments of your market to reach. Okay, so we talked about exposure, that you've got to get a lot more followers and you got to get more influential followers, and generally going to the social media dorks tends to be a really good way to do that, and like the most sort of bleeding edge social media places you can think of. That's a good way to get influential followers. Awareness is the second layer down. So now that I'm following you on Twitter, or I'm fans of your page on Facebook, or I'm on your email list, I don't see everything that you're going to produce. I may not open every email. I may not read every status update. I'm probably not going to see every tweet that you make. And so you have to do something to make me actually aware of that message before I can spread it. And so the old advertising cliche is break through the noise, and we're going to cut through the clutter of the, that we made the last time we did a campaign through you. And essentially that usually breaks down to shouting. Right, to typing in caps lock, or to being louder and bigger and bolder. And so this is a study done by DoubleClick, which is an ad serving network, and what they found is that the larger the ad size, the more clicks they get, the higher the click-through rate. Okay, surprise. So unfortunately, kind of the takeaway here is bigger and louder does work to a point. Okay, so you can, but I think what is more important than yelling really loud is to yell more effectively, essentially, or be more effective and generate attention in other ways. And one of the most interesting ways to do that, I think, is something called selective attention. If you've ever been to a noisy cocktail party, or a noisy networking event, and you can barely hear the person right in front of you talking because the place is so noisy, but you hear your name across the room. Somebody across the room says your name really quiet, and you hear that. That's called selective attention. Humans our senses are built to intake in far more information than we could ever hope to consciously process. So we have pretty sophisticated filtering mechanisms to help us filter out what the important parts of what we're hearing and what we're sensing are. And so as a marketer, you can take advantage of selective attention, and you can personalize. So you can talk to your audience. Email marketers have done this for years. Basically, you say, hey, Dan, or whatever, in the subject line of the beginning of the email, and I'm more likely to read it. Now, people are kind of hip to those tricks, so it's not as easy to do, but I'll talk about a little trick you can do a little bit later on to make your content seem more personalized, okay? But for now, let's talk about, now you can shout over the top of the crowd, you can be more personalized, and you can kind of talk through the crowd, or you can avoid crowds altogether. You can zig while everybody else is zagging. And what I mean by that is you can avoid link fatigue, you can avoid noise, right? Avoid it altogether instead of trying to get louder than it. So in this study, what I did is I looked at Twitter accounts, and I looked at the amount of clicks they got, the click-through rate, that is the amount of clicks they got and the links they posted divided by the number of followers they have. And what I found is that and it was, click-through rates varied wildly all over the board, but what I found was, if I tweet one link, I get X click-through rate. If I tweet one link and then I don't tweet again for an hour. If I tweet 2 links in an hour, I get a much, much lower click-through rate. If I tweet 3 links in an hour, I get an even lower click-through rate, and so on. Meaning that the more noise you're creating and the more you're giving me to choose from, the less I'm going to be able to give my attention, or less attention that each one of those links is actually going to get. Now, the effect is true also if you look at day of the week. Twitter tends to be more active earlier in the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But if you look at click-through rate, it tends to go up Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Even on the weekends, it tends to be much higher than during the week, meaning that when the noise has lessened, and when the amount of other information you're trying to shout over the top of has decreased, that is when you're going to get the highest click-through rates. Okay, and then again, when you look at Facebook sharing, what I did here is I looked at articles and I looked at how often they were shared on Facebook. What I found is that while the volume, and that's the little gray bars on the bottom, the volume of stories published on these different websites, and these are very popular news websites. If you look at my website, you'll find this post and you'll see which websites I use. But very popular websites publish less on the weekends, but the amount of Facebook sharing that the articles they do publish on the weekends gets increases dramatically. So I think the takeaway here is avoid link fatigue. When everybody else is zagging, zig, right? When everybody else is publishing a ton, be a little quieter, and then people start slowing down, publish more. And again, I've looked at email marketing, and this, email marketing click-through rates go up on the weekends again because less people are doing email marketing. So try to think about marketing to your audience at a time where they're traditionally not going to be as busy. You're not going to be marketing to as heavily. Now we're down to what I think is the most interesting layer, and this is where I think I spend the most time, and this is motivation. So now that I've got a bunch of followers, and now that I've gotten, you become aware of my idea, you've seen my tweet, I've got a bunch of followers, you've seen my tweet. Now, what is it about that tweet, or what is it about that status update that makes me want to share it? What is it about it that makes it viral, motivates it to make it viral? So the first question I asked of this data, my nose is itchy. the first thing that I asked was, why do people share? What are the motivations behind sharing? And one of the most important things to think about is that the average user of Facebook, for instance, which is the most sort of mainstream social media site today, the average user of Facebook has 130 fans. That's a bunch. I'm giving this presentation to just under 130 people, and this is a performance, right? I know I'm in front of people. I'm putting on a persona. I'm doing things that I want you to see me doing, essentially, right? And so social media users know that they're always performing, essentially, right? And so I'm only going to do things in social media that make me look cool, or that I think make me look cool at least, right? That help me express myself. And the number one motivator on how I decide if things are cool is reputation. Does me sharing this link on Facebook, does me liking this brand on Facebook, does me retweeting this tweet make me look cool? Does it increase my reputation as somebody in the know, somebody cool, somebody hip, whatever the case is? Does it increase my reputation? So the takeaway here for marketers is help your audience look cool. If your audience can express themselves with your brand and can say, hi, I'm cool, I'm in with the cool crowd or whatever, just because they've liked your brand or they're hip to your brand or whatever, that's going to be something that they're going to love you for and they're going to spread. Now, a sociology theory, there's an interesting sociology theory, rather, called the theory of social exchange, and the seminal work on social exchange was written by a gentleman named George C. Homans in a paper he wrote called Social Behavior as Exchange. And basically what he says is that every interaction between people is an exchange of value, of information, whatever it is. And that the more I exchange information with you, and the more value I get out of the information that I'm exchanging with you, the more I'm going to value our interactions, and so therefore the more I'm going to interact with you. Okay, and so when you're thinking about your marketing campaigns, think not only about giving value to your audience, but also think about giving your audience value that they can give to their friends. Can you give your audience something that they can share with their friends? Because if you can, then that's what they're going to spread. That's what they're going to be motivated to spread, because they want to be seen as somebody. They want to get the reputation as somebody who gives value, as somebody who is valuable. Now, another thing that helps people determine what is valuable is the idea of novelty. I'm not going to share information that everybody else knows. Why would I? Information is power when it is scarce. So if you think of yourself as a caveman, if you knew of the best hunting grounds, if you knew of the best place to go pick berries, that's very useful information for your tribe, especially if you're a hunter-gatherer or a berry-picking tribe or whatever. But that information becomes less valuable every time some new person or some new tribe knows about that information. So if I want to build myself up as a reputation of having, excuse me, I want to build up a reputation of being the person with the information first. I want you to think of me as the person you heard that first from. Remember, you heard it here first, folks. That kind of stuff, right? I want to be known as the person, the source of new information. And so scarcity, again, it's basically the same concept, but scarcity is when that's when information is powerful and valuable, when it's scarce. If everybody knows it, it's not all that valuable anymore. Warnings are a great example of this. Warnings, if you think about an urban legend, for instance, there's one of my favorite urban legends is Lover's Lane. So boyfriend and girlfriend go up to Lover's Lane, and they're necking. Excuse me, and they're necking again. They're necking, whatever they do in the 50s. I don't know. I don't even know what necking really is, but either case. And so they're making out, or whatever they do. And over the radio comes a warning, like, oh my God, there's a psycho killer escaped from the insane asylum, and he's coming to get you guys up there on Lover's Lane. And so the boyfriend peels away and drives away or whatever, and then they get home and they discover there's a bloody hook on the door or something. Oh yeah, and the psycho killer had a hook for a hand. You get the point. You probably heard the story. It may have been different in your version of it. Maybe in your version of it, the boyfriend was hanging upside down, scratching the roof of the car. But in either case, the point of the story, there's a warning, and that warning is don't go to Lover's Lane with your boyfriend and make out, because A, your parents don't want you to, and B, you might get killed by a serial killer. The other side to that story that marketers can use is that there is a piece of scarce information that becomes revealed at the end of the story. The boyfriend peels out, and then they don't realize until they get home that there's a bloody hook hanging on the door. That information was scarce because it wasn't known that the killer was right there and almost got them. So that is why that story is so valuable. Now, during World War II, the OSS and the MI6. The OSS is the American organization that was eventually going to become the, my coworkers are popping up behind their cubicles looking at me. And they're being really loud, so they should be quieter. And so during World War II, the OSS, which is the American organization that would eventually become the CIA, and MI6, which is, you know, James Bond in Britain, both had departments that were designed to weaponize rumors and use contagious ideas as propaganda weapons. Did we lose sound again? Anyways, and what they found was that people who, or rather when there is something that people really want to know about, when there's an information void, that is when rumors spread a lot. Meaning, if there's a big boom in a town, and nobody has any official explanation for what that boom was, there will be a lot of rumors about it. Think about Tiger Woods, for instance. For a couple of days, we knew that his wife was chasing him down the driveway with a golf club, but we didn't know exactly what had happened or why she was doing that. And then a bunch of rumors spread. Again, another example of this is that the iPad, or the Apple tablet, nobody knew exactly what the iPad was and how it was going to work, but everybody knew that something like that was coming. And so there was an information void about it, and a ton of rumors spread. Okay? And so there's two takeaways here. One is there is, you know, don't let information void spread around your brand. If you want to be able to control the message about your brand, especially in times of crisis, don't let the information void spread, or don't let the information void happen. So if some people want to know something about your brand that's happened during a crisis, be the first person, be the source of authoritative information, and get out there and say something. The other side of this is if in your industry there is something that everybody wants to know about, be the first source of that information, be the authoritative source of that information, and your content will become a rumor and spread. Yes, so Apple does do really well with information voids. They are a huge exception. They break a lot of the rules that I found in the data about social media marketing. But that's what I'm saying. They create information voids and they allow rumors to spread. So there's two takeaways here. You can do both, but just be aware that if you want to be able to control the message, the best way to do it is by releasing information early and fast. Imitation is how humans learn, especially in childhood. And I've talked to people who work with monkeys, and apparently, you know, the saying "monkey see, monkey do." It's not actually all that true. They do imitate each other, but humans are much better at imitating each other. Like if I imitate, you know, Maggie, my coworker, who's sitting over there, and I teach her how to do something really, really awesome, and then Melissa, who sits next to her, imitates something that she does. That doesn't really happen in the monkey kingdom, right? So Melissa and Maggie wouldn't actually do that if they were monkeys. In monkeys, you know, what would happen is somebody would copy me and that would be the end of it. They wouldn't teach it to a bunch of people. But that's what humans do, is we learn through imitation. Yeah, somebody just said put Maggie on. They should come over here if they want to say hi. But imitation is how humans learn, right? And so when we see somebody do something, that's when we think it's true. And what that manifests itself in, especially online, is something called social proof, meaning they're all saying hi, Maggie, meaning that she's waving. And social proof is something that was popularized by a gentleman named Robert Cialdini in his book Influence or Persuasion. I forget which one it's actually called. It's a great book. I have read it though. It's a great book. And what he said in that book is that as we see people taking a specific behavior, we view it as more correct the more people that are doing it, because we're learning through imitation. We're imitating people we see do things. And what happens is we get something called an informational cascade. Now let me take an example here. Okay, you're really, really hungry, and there's a bunch of restaurants on the street. There's two restaurants on the street, not a bunch, but there's restaurant A and there's restaurant B, right? And you don't know anything about either restaurant, and you're really, really hungry. So which restaurant would you pick in this example right here? So by show of hands, quote unquote, here in the chat pane, I want you to say if you think restaurant B is the better one. Who thinks restaurant B is the better one? Okay, now who thinks restaurant A is the better one? Let me know. I want to see a whole bunch of answers. Yeah, it depends on how hungry you are. Okay, so for the most part, everybody thinks restaurant A. Or somebody. Yeah, if you say B, you're saying it just to be difficult. Says UFGX. I can't pronounce your name, but you get what I'm talking about. In either case, that's the power of social proof at work. Every time I do this presentation live, everybody in the audience raises their hand for restaurant A, or most people do. Usually, a couple people say, "Well, I don't want to wait in line because I'm really hungry." But I told you nothing about these two restaurants. The only thing I did is I showed you that there were people lining up outside one of the restaurants, and therefore, you think that's a better restaurant because there's a bunch of people lined up. in front of it, and those people, you see those people and you think, okay, they must know something that I don't. The social proof of this restaurant must be really important. And then another example of this is that if you look at Mashable, or if you look at this is from Mashable, but if you look at a article on Mashable, if you didn't know anything about iPad sales, which one would you think was more correct? And when I asked this, generally everybody raised their hands for the top one, because it's been tweeted more and it's been shared on Facebook more. So for quite a while, for years, I had been giving this presentation. I had been saying that social proof is really important, and you should make your articles look like they've been read a whole lot, they've been tweeted a whole lot. And I'm still not entirely convinced that's not true, but I actually did an experiment. What I did on my site is I took a tweet name button and I screenshotted it, popped it into Photoshop, and made a fake one. And I made one that said I had 0 tweets, and made one that said I had 776 tweets, or a real lot of tweets, at least for my blog. And I split tested them on my site. I showed half the people who came to my site one, half the people who came to my site other, and I measured which one got clicked more. To a statistically significant level of difference, the button that said I had been retweeted 0 times was clicked more. Okay, the other, and then so I was like, maybe there's like a first tweet effect. People just want to be the first person to tweet something. So I tried 15 and 776 instead of 0 and 776, and what I found is that the people with a lower confidence level, with a lower statistical significance level, more people clicked 15 than clicked 776. On the flip side of that coin, then I tried feed burner numbers. I faked the feed burner button that said I had very few readers, and then I faked the feed burner button that said I had a whole lot of readers. And what I found is that, again, with a lower statistical significance confidence level, so there's a good chance that these aren't actually true, but they're probably very similar, or they may be true, people tended to prefer the button that had more subscribers listed on it. So that tells you how social proof may be a a much more complex idea than I previously thought. Now, I have people who read my site know that I have some level of social proof already. I've been pre-selected by the people who read my site. They know I've been read. They know I have a bunch of subscribers. They know I've been tweeted a lot. I've been pre-selected, essentially, right? And that information comes across in the feed burner button. So people are looking for information that has been pre-selected, meaning a lot of people have subscribed to that. But when I release a new piece of content, people want to be among the first to tweet it. They are more motivated to tweet it if a lot of other people have not already, because they want to tweet new information from a source that is cool because it's been pre-selected. So social proof and novelty are actually very subtle concepts that work in conjunction with each other. So I always kind of wanted to put that in there, because I used to say, oh, social proof, but they're interesting and they're very sort of nuanced concepts. Now, the Goliath effect is something that happens in social media, and so the Goliath effect that I'm talking about is a sociological version of the Goliath effect. Well, Chris, a person wants lots of followers. You also want lots of retweets, but you want to make it look like you have lots of followers and not that many retweets. Like you're a big, you're pre-selected, but the person is like the first person to discover a unique piece of content that you've produced. So the Goliath effect essentially means that it is a phenomenon that happens. It's a story structure, essentially. Big faceless corporation attacks little small guy. Little small guy defeats big faceless corporation. Audience cheers. That's the Goliath effect in folklore and literature. My forehead is shiny. There was an article written in a book called Mathematical Themas, which is all about smart, different mathematical things. And one of the things they were talking about was viral sentences. That is, sentences that spread themselves. And so it's a lot of stuff like, it is your duty to spread this idea. And unless somebody believes it, they're not going to spread the idea. But somebody else wrote in, there is a viral sentence structure that is subtly powerful like this. And what that sentence structure is the villain is wronging the victim. For instance, one of the most popular articles on my site was Twitter plans to mangle retweets. I'm actually not in Starbucks, I'm in my office, and yeah, it's loud. So the villain is wronging the victim. But so like I said, the most popular article on my site was, Twitter plans to mangle retweets. Twitter was the villain, mangling was the wronging. That was the injustice they were doing to the victim, which was retweets. So if you identified with the victim, if you identified or you wanted to support retweets, you liked the way retweets worked, then you wanted to prevent the villain, who's much bigger than both the victim and the people who are reading it, you want to prevent them from doing the wronging. You can't do that as an individual because you are smaller than Twitter. What you can do, however, is you can get other people on your side and try to beat them en masse. So you spread the idea. If you believe that big corporations were polluting the whales, you can't stop big corporations, or most people can't, because most people are not as powerful as a big corporation. But what they can do is you can team up with a whole bunch of other people, and the way you team up with people is you get a bunch of them on your side, and so you spread the idea. So if you can use this kind of message, and again, Apple, we used them as an example once before, but what Apple has done this brilliantly. Apple, at first, it was anti-IBM. It was IBM is destroying computer consumers. It was Microsoft. Microsoft is destroying, you know what I mean? And they use this sort of Goliath effect and villain wronging the victim, us and them kind of thing, brilliantly. So think about how you can do that. Another effect that is interesting that you see in social media, and I've learned this from Urban Legends, actually, and I'm just trying to fix my headset so it stays up here a little bit better. You can see it like falling on the side of me. Anyways, what you notice, what communal recreation is, have you ever played the game of telephone, where you whisper something into somebody next to you's ear, and then that person whispers into somebody else's ear, and then that person whispers into the next person's ear, and so on and so forth. And then at the end, somebody says what they've heard, and in the beginning, somebody says what they said originally, and they're invariably different. That happens in social media. It's called communal recreation. Every time I hear an idea, right before I spread it, unless I'm spreading it verbatim, I'm going to twist the idea around a little bit and make it fit my mental models a little bit more, okay? And so this happens in social media. And so what businesses should do to take advantage of this is to make your brand a box of crayons, not a rubber stamp. Make your brand something that people can remix and can play with, not just that they stamp on and go with. The tattoo is through difficulty to the stars in Latin. Now, one of my favorite parts of this presentation, I'm going to take a drink of delicious Mountain Dew, and no, it's not paid product placement. I have an in-house audience. They keep laughing every time I tell jokes. My coworkers over there, which is, no, it's good. I need the feedback. When I did a study a while ago, and I asked people why they spread ideas online. Like, what are the reasons you share content with your friends? And one of the most important things they told me is that it was because it seemed personally relevant. It seemed like it was right up this person's alley, or it reminded me of this person, or made me think of such and such. You know what I mean? So I like, I like something, and so my friend saw this, and it made me think of them, so they sent it to me. And then when you ask people why they do one-to-many sharing, that is why they blog about stuff, why they tweet about stuff, they usually say something very similar, and it's audience relevance, meaning I knew my audience would like this. It's right up my audience's alley. So now I could tell you the takeaway here is be more relevant, but that's kind of useless. So what I'm going to tell you is use combined relevance. Now I'm really into zombies, and I'm also really into marketing. And so or I'm also a social media scientist. And so if somebody sees an article about marketing to zombies, or zombie marketing lessons learned from zombies, Chris, I'll try to get the in-house audience to come over and visit in a second. But if somebody sees something that has zombies in it and then reminds them of me, they're going to send it to me because it's combined relevance. So let me tell you guys a story. And it's the first time I've told this story a few times, but I've never done it at my desk with the actual toy here. But I spoke at an event. In Las Vegas a little while ago, and at the event I told this story, and people, I told people that I was really into zombies, and that I'm a social media scientist. And after the event, I got this in the mail. I don't know if you can see this, but this is a zombie scientist action figure. Actually, I call him Dr. Eat-Your-Brains or something along those lines. PhD, MD, Dr. Eat-Your-Brains. Yeah. But the point is, somebody saw something that was combined. It's both a scientist and a zombie, right? And so it got sent to me. So when you are doing your marketing, you put these two things together, and you say, okay, I know there's a lot of people in social media who are into social media and fashion, right? And so you make Twitter necklaces, and those have been huge. Or you say there's a lot of people in social media, or whatever your market is, there's a lot of people who are into ball bearings who are also into country music, so you make ball bearings with the face of Rodney Atkins on them. Okay, points if you know who Rodney Atkins is. Yeah, if you find out the pieces of the Venn diagram, you can you can create content that has those 2 or 3 or 4 whatever distinct interests together. Ball bearings and zombies. Like if you found like a machinist zombie action figure, you know, whatever the case is, that stuff really works. And so the takeaway here is use combined relevance. And again, if you are in your target market, and you probably are, there's a good chance you're going to actually be a great way to figure out, like your interest personally is going to be a great way to figure stuff out. I'm into social media, I'm into zombies, I'm also into beer. A lot of people on social media are into beer, so if I talk about beer in social media, people are going to love this. Like if I show you the St. Bernardus bottle, people are going to love that, right? Beer Belgium, that was a Belgian beer I just showed too, Doug. Okay, so now we talked about why people share. Now we're going to talk about what people share. Okay, what types of content people share. Now, I did this study on Facebook, and what I did on Facebook is I looked at readability. Readability is a measure of the grade level that in school that you would have had to finish to understand a piece of content. So as readability essentially goes up, like as it goes to the to the whatever this direction on the graph, the amount of education you need to have to reach that grade level, or to read that article increases, and so the content is essentially more complex. So what I found is that articles that had very complex language, very educationally taxing language, tended to be shared less on Facebook. So I actually have a theory that Facebook is very similar to the Jersey Shore, and I'm going to prove it with several data points here. But here's the first one. As you talk intelligently, as you talk more complexly, at least, maybe not intelligently, but as you use bigger words, the amount of time stuff is shared on Facebook goes down. So you want to talk a little lower, not lower, but you want to talk simply. Think USA Today, not the New York Times. Another interesting thing that I found, this is with retweets, is that retweets tend to be third-person verb, third-person noun, and verb heavy. Meaning they're article newspaper headlines. They're about things doing things, not about what I'm doing or how I'm doing it. And then when you ask people, another thing that's interesting, when you ask people what kind of content they share, a lot of people say they share news and opinion. And in fact, so in this graph, the green line is everybody in my survey. The red and blue lines indicate sort of influential people that share more often and with more people. And what I found is that people who are more influential tend to share humor less than they share opinion. So again, I've told a whole bunch of jokes, and Maggie and Melissa over there haven't laughed all that much at a lot of them. But, and I don't know if they laughed at that one either, I can't hear them. Oh, they're doing work, they tell me. So, humor is really difficult. If you think about Saturday Night Live, they have a full staff of writers and they can barely manage to be funny once a week. As a marketer, I think it's humorous that people think that marketers can be humorous on a regular basis. So news and opinion and novelty spreads is the kind of content that people like to share a lot more. And the reason is gossip is a very sort of contagious idea, or contagious kind of idea, and news is essentially just confirmed gossip. Here's one of my favorite quotes from a woman named Liz Smith, and she said, "Gossip is just news running ahead of itself in a satin dress." Essentially, news is then just gossip with a suit on. And again, just to back that up, when I looked at the word occurrence, when I looked at the number of, how common the words in normal tweets are and how common the words in retweets are, I found that retweets tend to contain more novel words, more rare words. So stop saying the things that everybody else is saying. Now, this is a study from an advertising, folks who worked in advertising, and said that advertisements that were both original and familiar at the same time attracted attention and were retained the member easily. So the way to use this is something called new old. Excuse me, new old is essentially stuff like steampunk. Do you guys know what steampunk is? Steampunk is you take modern era technology and you make it out of steam age era gadget, technology, right? So you make a keyboard out of like pistons and stuff that you would have back in the day in steam age. And so it's a combination of new stuff and old stuff. It's new content in an old structure, or old content in a new structure, right? Another example of this is a newer Romeo and Juliet movie with Claire Danes and Leonardo DiCaprio. It's a dreamy movie, but what happens in that movie is they take the original script and they kind of modify the structure of it to fit modern times. And so when he's saying, "Hand me my long sword," he's actually picking up a long gun, stuff like that, right? So if you can think of a way to take your old content and put into a new structure, or your new content put in an old structure, or something that people have heard before, and do it in a way that they haven't, that is an interesting and sometimes easier way to yeah, the Network Solutions parody of the GoDaddy commercials is very similar to New Old. Now, when you look at retweets and you look at the most retweetable words, the most important one, I think, is number one here. That's the most retweetable word and phrase that wasn't super common, is the word you. Not me, you. So when I'm talking to you, when I'm talking about you, that is more likely to get retweeted. Also, look at number 11. Please retweet. It works. People don't like that I say that it works sometimes, but it does absolutely work. And so if you want to get retweeted, an easy way to do that is say something about me. Say you. Here's how I can help you. Here's how you can do this. And say, please retweet. So don't forget the calls to action. Like any form of marketing, social media is such that when you want people to take a specific action, you have to ask them to do it. And so when you want a retweet, you have to say, please retweet. If you want a Facebook like, if you want to share, if you want a forward of your email, you need to ask for it. When you look at the most shareable words on Facebook, you find that Facebook, okay, Facebook is the most shareable. Yeah, that's because people on Facebook like talking about Facebook. But the rest of them are pretty mainstream. It's what's on the daily news or what's on the TV news. But I think that what's interesting is that the word how and the word why also occur here. Meaning, people don't want to hear just the soundbite things. They want to hear, they want to hear the deeper parts of the story. They want to hear what else is going on. The least retweetable words and phrases, however, yeah, the beer is on fire, guys. The beer is safe. It's right next to me. Nothing happened. Expert mind. It was just I'm next to a window, and so there was a fire outside. I don't know. I'll let you know if I hear a fire alarm and I have to go. So if you look at the least retweetable words and phrases, I'll drink the beer first before I use it to put out the fire. The least retweetable words and phrases is a list of really boring words. Not only am I talking about myself, I'm being boring. So I'm tired, I'm watching the game, but I'm bored, but I'm listening to something. It's really, really boring. So stop talking about yourself if you want to get retweets. And then the least Facebook shareable words are social media dork words. It's Twitter, social, iPhone, Google, Live, apps, just stuff that. So on Facebook, don't be a social media dork. It doesn't really work. Facebook is a much more mainstream audience. When I looked at the linguistic attributes of content and how often they got retweeted, I found that most of the types of content were about the same. However, social behavior is a lot more retweetable. So talking about RID stands for Regressive Imagery Dictionary. If you Google it, you'll find out what it is. It's a way to look at content and get into the linguistic and psychological attributes of the person who said the content. But people who are using social behavior type language tend to get retweeted more, so they're saying us, they're not just talking about themselves. When you look at Facebook linguistic content, on the other hand, again, this is why Facebook is a little bit like the Jersey Shore. Sexual content tends to be shared on Facebook more than any other kind of content out there. Now, not every brand can be sexy. I have an unfair advantage, but not every brand can be sexy. But if you look at the rest of the graph, it does tell you an interesting story. It tells you that positivity does a lot better than negativity. And again, I wish this wasn't true because I like going to restaurants and getting treated poorly and tweeting about them and getting free stuff. But in reality, finding the positive spin on a story, finding the hope, finding the positivity in a story generally does a lot better than going after the negativity. LIWC is the other linguistic system. It's like the counterpart to RID. I am the pretty one. My wife is the smart one. Absolutely. You've heard that one before. And so self-reference is super unretweetable. Again, talking about yourself doesn't work. So the takeaway here is stop talking about yourself, especially if you're a brand. So don't listen to the unicorns and rainbows myth of be yourself. Just stop talking about yourself. Talk as yourself, but don't talk about yourself. So that is the end of the presentation. We have a couple of minutes for questions. I want a bunch of questions, and I like getting stumped, so please ask me questions. Thank you guys for saying nice things about the presentation. This is my favorite presentation to give. I quite enjoyed giving that presentation. Any questions? Let's drink beer. Well, the beer is actually empty, but I already drank it. What is pi to 1,000 decimal places? Maggie, do you know? No? Okay, never mind. Never mind. I don't have any data specifically for Latin America. Again, I think that a lot of the things that I was talking about, especially when when they're based on history, when they're based on science, they tend to transcend cultures and even transcend specific technologies. Oh, you guys gotta slow down a little bit. How do you find influential people to seed? For most sort of mainstream audiences, the people who are on social media or things like Twitter are going to be some of the most important people to find. In social media, it gets a little tricky, and there's tools, and you can use different metrics, number of retweets, number of followers. You can use stuff like Cloud or whatever to find people. What will follow Facebook and Twitter? I don't know. I think location-based services are going to continue to get really good until one of them really hits the nail on the head and becomes the Facebook or Twitter of location-based services. Because I think that the differentiation between online and offline is going to start to blur, and people are going to be using both at the same time, essentially. Let's see here. Who's out there is good at talking as themselves but not about themselves? I mean, I try to do that as much as possible. I'm trying to think of anybody off the top of my head. It's hard to have a specific example of that, but the goal is talk the way only you can talk. Talk from your personal experience, talk from your personal specific background, but don't talk about yourself while you're doing that. Yeah, third person versus first, but like from a unique perspective. How does a B2B company talk more about others? A B2B company like here at HubSpot, what we do is we produce a lot of educational content, a lot of educational tools that are free. And so we talk about how you can do better marketing, how you can become an inbound marketing rock star, how you can get more leads, how you can become the hero at your company. And then, if you're really interested in that, then you can come and ask us questions about how we can help you do that. Who is an influencer in my words? That's I think an influencer is somebody who shares content more frequently than most people and with more people than most people. So to me, that's somebody who has a lot of followers or tweets a lot. Is an example, or has a lot of friends on Facebook and posts a lot of status updates, or has a lot of email friends and sends a lot of emails. Barry asks, Radian 6 or Simosis, how about HubSpot? I actually don't know. I've never used either one of those software packages, so I can't really comment on that. Let's see here. What are good advices for creating? So normally you can't create an information void, but you can find information voids, right? If you're a huge brand like Apple, then you can create an information void, but you can find one. So if somebody in your industry, if there's something going on in your industry and you want to find out, and a lot of people are asking questions about it, you can fill the information void. Go on Twitter, type in your keywords, then put a question mark and push enter, like in search, and you'll find people asking questions about your industry that you can answer. Mary, I don't think I've used TweetChat all that often. It is pretty sweet. I think the one time that I looked at it, this system actually, because it's going to be free for public use, is very similar, I think, and could be awesome. It's got the video, it's got the presentation. I like kind of more structured types of content like that. Any specific advice for nonprofit organizations? Yeah, nonprofit organizations can really use that Goliath effect and that like hero or that the villain is wrong in the victim storyline. They can use that really well, and they can say, we have to help save such and such. We have to help prevent whoever from doing bad things to the victim. Yes, and Beth Canner is an amazing resource for nonprofits. Cool. So I think we're just about out of time here. Thank you guys all for coming. This was a ton of fun. Beth Cantor is her name. No, thank you guys. Awesome. Thank you, Catherine.
I heard you talking and I was like...